President Duterte says he's not in a hurry to resolve the South China Sea dispute and threatens Western nations again from interfering in his war on drugs. Miners oppose Environment Secretary Roy Cimatu's proposal to increase the excise taxes on mining firms, warning that it could drive away potential investments. Cebu Pacific launches a new hub in Cagayan de Oro City as a budget carrier scrambles to open up new routes in the region. And Bloomberge Resorts Chair Enrique Razon says they're on track to start constructing a new casino in Quezon City despite opposition from residents. Good morning, I'm Regina Lay. This is Starting Gate. Straight on to the markets we go. And another late afternoon move saw the PSE close out Thursday with gains and come within striking distance of 8,500 once more. So how might the local bourse fare on this last trading day of the week? Let's bring in JP now for more on the markets. And JP, what a week it's been, but you don't look too impressed right now. Tell us why.
Okay, Rich. Well, granted, we're about 13 points from breaching 8,500 once again. And in contrast to the weakness we saw across most Asian markets on Thursday, the main index's 0.2% gain looks impressive on the surface. But remember, this happened relatively late in the day. And when you take a look at how trading volumes actually looked by Thursday's close, you're going to notice that they were rather lackluster, significantly thinner than 20-day averages, calling the conviction of yesterday's move up into question. Now, the PSE also saw net foreign fund outflows of about $9 million, with offshore portfolios still unimpressed with the main index and its pricey valuations relative to the region. Now, if you're looking for convincing gains, well, it's got to be in the banking sector. When you look at the financial sector, it led all other counters quite handily, and a 1 4/10% rise in the financials index, maintaining solid gains throughout most of Thursday's session. In fact, when you look at how most of the banks did, by the close, only East West Bank suffered a slight dip, while heavyweight Metro Bank got a boost after taking full control of its credit card arm by buying out ANZ's 40% stake. But when you look at it, there's no real strong catalyst that's apparent with regards to how the banks actually moved. Now, one stock that's worth taking note of today, HarborStar. It was the second best performer on the all shares, trailing only a Vivant Corporation. And analysts have taken a liking to its diversification move into solar power. Now remember, HarborStar acquired a 60% stake in Astro Energy, and PCCI's James Lago believes that this acquisition will boost earnings and lead to a revaluation of the company. But Lago did caution investors to be careful, stating that HarborStar's valuations still aren't that cheap, and that this expansion into power is still on paper. So while one of 2016's outstanding performers is looking to finish the year on a strong note, it's worth being prudent when considering HarborStar in one's portfolio.
Well, speaking of second liners, Japes, we're also getting word that we've got news on Cirtec. The electronics manufacturer seems to have sold 12 million shares. Why is this worth taking note of?
Well, given that Cirtec is on four straight days of gains, and it's also looking to a U.S. IPO for its antenna unit Quintel, the share sale could stop Cirtec's rise in its tracks. The stock is trading at about 44 pesos 95 centavos a share after notching a 1% gain on Thursday. That's worth taking note because keep this in mind. This block sale of about 12 million shares was done at a discount, about 39 pesos a share, and that represents about a 13.2% discount against Thursday's closing price. Now, not only that, but the block sale represents about 2.9% of Cirtec's outstanding shares on the market. Now, could this weigh on Cirtec at the open? Well, Reg, remember the last time we dealt with a significant share sale at a discount? That was just a couple of weeks ago, and that happened to Robinsons Retail when an undisclosed institutional investor sold nearly 29 million shares at a 5% discount to the previous close. And that share sale was for about 2.1% of RRHI's outstanding shares. And ever since October 10, the stock has been on a losing streak ever since that particular share sale. Now, I'm not saying that Cirtec is going to slide at the open. Market sentiment is still rather rosy on the manufacturer's aggressive outlook and their plans to expand their footprint in the U.S. But remember, recent history can't be discounted, and we could see Cirtec shares take a few lumps on the back of this discounted block sale.
President Duterte sees no need to rush a resolution on the South China Sea conflict. Speaking at the high-level forum on ASEAN at 50 last night, he told the audience composed of diplomats and foreign policy experts that he is open to sharing resources in the disputed area.
I hope that ASEAN will grow strong and solve the problems of the serious problems confronting us. The South China Sea is one, but we are not in a hurry. And as a matter of fact, what we did was really the correct step, and was to avoid confrontational talks with almost all of the parties concerned. Just ask for a limited time to solve the problem, and sharing of the resources, if it could be done.
Come November, he will challenge fellow ASEAN leaders to boost trade within the region using the EU as a model. The president also went off script again and opened his keynote with a warning to Western nations, though he didn't specify who this time.
To Western world, please do not impose your will on us. Do not derogate our sovereignty by lecturing on us the civilities of a country which we termed a democratic state. It is not maybe to your satisfaction that you do not like what we are doing, but you know, there are things which we have to do because we have to do it. Or not, then you can do it for us. You know, guys, we have the United Nations. If you think you have qualms against me, go to the United Nations, make your representations, state your complaint, and ask the body to investigate us for being a member of that organization. Do you really think that Russia and China would go for it? Expel the Philippines? One vote from either of the permanent members would goes kaput.
When he finally read his prepared remarks, Duterte called on ASEAN to focus on the issue of piracy in the Strait of Malacca. But he had a slip of the tongue and ended up dragging Malaysia into it.
I think that has to stop. I just finished the war in Malaysia. Then perhaps I can refocus the entire armed forces to deal with this problem once and for all. There is one thing I can just offer. Blast them out of the seas to keep our shipping lanes open and safe.
We imagine he meant to say he's just finished the war on Marawi, not Malaysia. Moving on now, Foreign Affairs Secretary Alan Peter Cayetano was at the same forum wherein he confirmed that all new grants from the EU will be rejected on President Duterte's orders. That's even though it's been clarified that the group of EU socialists who criticized the war on drugs does not represent the official EU mission. Cayetano now has to formally communicate this to EU Ambassador to the Philippines, Franz Jessen. In defending the decision, Cayetano insisted that grants from other countries don't come with strings attached.
Pagka yung grant, may strings attached. Pagka yung grant, may mga agreement na pwede kayo makialam sa politika namin, it's more damaging than helpful. So if you look, for example, at the pending grants ngayon, kung titignan mo yung wording, it's one-sided in favor of the EU as far as being able to cancel it. Then number two, sila lang ang meron ding kung anong hinahanap nila sa pagtulong nila. Samantalang there are many other countries now who are giving us grants na wala ng agreement. It's just a question of we will accept it. I don't blame the president in drawing the line. Like sa Marawi, India, Japan, China, Russia, Di ba? The 3.5 billion na binigay na ng China sa atin, lahat yun, walang nakatali, walang usap. Yung binigay sa atin ng Japan, sa atin Coast Guard, and yung mga projects na binibigay ng Japan, walang ano yun, walang agreements. US depende. May mga ibang agreements na may department to department na signatures and parameters. But marami din na walang strings attached.
Let's get to the speed now on other headlines. The Chamber of Mines of the Philippines is warning that increasing excise taxes on mining firms may discourage future investments. The group was reacting to Environment Secretary Roy Simatu's comment that the current 2% excise tax is too small.
This is studied before. There were some proponents before to increase the 2% to 5%. But umaangar rin ng mga mining government. So, ano naman yan eh. Pero we have to really find out, and these are the things that we have to plan properly. My bottom line is that it should define the wish of the president for responsible mining, make sure that the proper taxes will be given.
Simatu will bring up the issue to the Mining Industry Coordinating Council, or MICC, which will meet on Tuesday next week. The chamber says requiring miners to pay more may result in financial losses. That's because they're paying a host of other taxes on both the national and local government levels, aside from the 2% excise tax.
Baka nakikita lang ng karamihan ay the gross. Malaki talaga ang gross revenue. Kumbaga, malaking pinagbentahan. Ang hindi nakikita ng karamihan, malaki rin ang cost of operations. We've looked at the historical records of the Mining Act, no? And the 2% was parang it was considered by the experts as a fair share for government. Kasi pag tinutal mo lahat ng taxes plus the 2%, nalabas siya parang 45% of revenues ang share ng gobyerno eh.
The country's balance of payments position reversed to a surplus for the first time in 5 months. The gauge came in at positive $24 million for September, narrowing the year-to-date deficit to below $1.4 billion. That's still almost 3 times the BSP's projection of $500 million deficit for the entire year. Monetary officials expect the country's external payments to remain under control, supported by remittances and outsourcing revenues. And Chinese electronics firms are looking into locating into Philippine economic zones. Socioeconomic Planning Secretary Ernesto Peña says a couple of Chinese firms are considering setting up facilities in the Clark area. Discussions are preliminary at this stage, but Peña says there are also talks of possibly creating a whole new industrial zone exclusive for the Chinese.
It will be the government, and then, with the Chinese committing, bringing in locators there to make sure that it is worth the cost of the infrastructure for that industrial park.
We'll pause for a very short break for now, but still to come. Cebu Pacific cranks up the competition, opening up more routes to connect Mindanao to the rest of the Philippines and even Southeast Asia. A chat with President and CEO Lance Gokongwei next. The bigwig, bloomberge chair Enrique Razon says opposition against their Quezon City casino means it's a good investment. Those stories coming up. Okay, back on Starting Gate, I'm Regina Lay. Cebu Pacific is opening a new hub in Cagayan de Oro City. The airline connects the city to 8 domestic destinations. Laguindingan Airport will be the budget carrier's 7th hub in the country. Now, Bev Natividad caught up with company CEO Lance Gokongwei, who says Cebu Pacific is working with authorities to finally service the Zamboanga-Sandakan route.
We're working with the local government and regulatory authorities to make sure that everything's in place to allow that important connectivity between Zamboanga and Sandakan.
What major challenges, if any, operational details that you needed to iron out that caused that delay?
Basically, we're working with the regulatory agencies just to make sure that everything's in place for a successful launch.
So is there a new timetable for that?
We'll announce it when we're ready.
So yung sa BIMP Iaga, are you still pursuing new routes to be able to pursue a seamless connectivity in that area?
Sure, it's important. I mean, connecting Mindanao with the rest of the world is important.
What new routes are we looking for in there?
We're starting flights between Cagayan de Oro, Laguindingan with Katiklan and Dumaguete, and that's in addition to the flights we already have between Cagayan and Cebu, Bacolod, Iloilo, and Davao. No? So you can imagine that when we started 20 years ago, we were just only flying Cagayan to Manila, and now we're connecting Cagayan to 8-9 other domestic cities, and hopefully in the coming years, connected to the rest of the world.
Everybody is talking about Marawi. Any plans from your end to contribute to that?
Yeah, we'll do our part. We're all very proud of us Filipinos that we've been able to successfully, the president and the armed forces have been successful in reclaiming Marawi, and the entire business sector will help in the rehabilitation and job creation there.
Philinvestland is gearing up to expand its presence in Mindanao now that the Marawi crisis has been contained. The developer is investing 5 billion pesos over the next 3 years to grow its economic housing brand, Futura. It's also building medium-rise buildings in the region under the Spatial brand. With the government shifting its focus to rebuilding Marawi, Philinvest is also lending a hand to the city's rehabilitation.
We still continue to do our housing in Mindanao because we're really all over. We're in Davao, Cagayan de Oro, Tagum, in Coronadal. So we're all over Mindanao. Actually, our company is involved in helping the Marawi rehabilitation. We're working with the NHA to provide the water system. Yes, for the housing component.
Meanwhile, Bloomberge is pushing through with its casino in Quezon City next year despite opposition from residents. A group who called themselves Concerned Citizens of Quezon City appealed to President Duterte to block the development of casinos, fearing the risk that gambling poses to the city's youth. Quezon City lawmakers had also conducted consultations on how to further regulate gambling in the area. Bloomberge is set to build its second casino on a 1.9 billion peso property on Vertis North. Company executive chairman and CEO Enrique Razon had earlier said that the new casino would be more similar to Solaire, which has a mix of retail and dining options.
If we were to make an investment that had no opposition, we would not make money. Oh, siyempre tuloy. Pag hindi magandang project yan, wala mag-oppose na. 2 years construction.
Starting when?
Starting next year.
Well, the PSE continues to test new highs, but no one said it was going to be a bumpy ride on the way to 8,500. So how might the local bourse fare on this last trading day of the week? Well, for more on the markets, I'm now joined by Willie Agregado. He's the president of VC Securities, and he's with me live in the studio. Willie, thanks for joining me this morning. Look, it's been a shortened trading week. The PSE managed to make a run at 8,500 earlier on, and we've seen these 100-point swings up and down at the moment. As brokers, what are you seeing on the floor? Why have the markets been moving quite dramatically, for lack of a better term, in the last couple of trading days?
Probably because we're looking at the end of the year figures, so probably people are positioning their shares on the up to the last quarter.
I see. But I mean, are people on the markets or on the floor, is the sentiment still strong that the PSE could actually breach 8,500 or still extend the recent gains?
Yeah. A month ago, I was interviewed. I said it's about 8.3. I predicted 8.5 for the last quarter. And I think it will still go up.
Okay, so we're close to 8,500 at the moment. Do you think there's still room to actually move up, or do you think this is as good as it gets for us?
Probably for the quarter, it's 8,500.
8.5 ended. All right. So look, we've seen this uptrend for the PSE, but we also noticed that volumes are starting to look thin once again. And it's been quite touch and go for most of the last 2 months. Volume still a little, appetite still a little bit, I guess, muted, for lack of a better term. Could this actually perhaps provide some headwinds for the PSE heading into the open today?
Yeah, probably people are positioning already for the next year at looking at 10,000 figures for me.
I see. Okay.
I see at 10,000 next year.
10,000 next year.
Yeah.
Oh wait, so you're actually looking at the PSE perhaps testing 10,000 levels next year.
Yes.
How soon do you think this might actually happen, and what do you think it's going to be contingent on?
Because of a lot of economic prospect for the Philippines, like the PPP, the influx of foreign investment, the ease on the capital acquisition. So probably this will be the one that will be pushing the market to the 10,000 figures.
Okay, so 10,000 is a target, but how do you think we're going to need foreign funds to really reach this particular target? Because we've seen foreign funds actually being a little skittish as of late. In fact, we saw about them selling about $9 million dollars worth of PSE shares yesterday.
Yeah, but eventually they will always come back. But imagine at the rate we're going, it's mostly dominated locally, so probably when they come in, it's still going to up.
I see. Okay. Look, Rudy, perhaps you can help us enlighten us. There was one sector that had a convincing run on Thursday, and it was the banking sector. They led all other counters by a sizable margin. And when you look at how the banks did across the board, you're seeing some pretty a convincing strength across most of our banks. Only East West Bank actually taking a bit of a step back. But apart from Metro Bank taking full control of their credit card unit, there's no real strong, I guess, no concrete reason for this across-the-board move up for most of these banks. Do you have any idea as to why the banking sector had such a strong outing on Thursday?
I think even for the last quarter, the banking system will still be going up because normally end of the year figures are good for the banking system. At East West Bank was earlier not that much, but because it already hit its figure a few months ago. Mm-hmm. It went up already. Okay. So probably people were just doing profit taking on that East West Bank.
Okay, but with regards to the rest of the banks, why do you think there's been such strong, I guess, a strong vote of confidence from the markets with regards to offers such as Metro Bank, Security Bank, and even some of the second liners like RCBC?
On the banking sector, last quarter is there's a lot of spending, so people spend a lot, and again that normally banks are they need a lot of good figures for their, I don't want to say this window dressing, not that much, but banks are normally good at the last quarter of the market sector.
Okay, so the banks are doing well. We have to talk also about how the miners are doing. October, when you look at how the mining and oil counters are done, October hasn't been very kind to the mining and oil sector. You're actually seeing it seeing significant dips since the start of the month. Now, we also have news that DNR Secretary Roy Simatu says that they absolutely have to raise the excise taxes on mining. Right now, it's at about 2%. Do you think this will actually, this could impact or hurt the mining counter as badly as, say, the closures and suspensions under his predecessor, Gino Lopez?
I don't think it will hurt because mining is a good industry. We're still new in the mining, and there's a lot of market for mining outputs.
Okay.
So I don't think that taxes would eventually affect the mining industry.
Any particular subsector in mining? So do you think the nickel mines are going to do better? Do you think Semirara is going to continue to carry the sector?
Semirara is one of the best mining sector. Though they're into coal, it's for power generation. I still bet that Semirara is a good one. especially with the production output.
Okay,
and
great.
the world market price.
Interesting insights. All right, so the mining counter perhaps being more resilient than we actually give it credit for, and definitely watching out for the banks. We'll have to leave it there for now, but Willie Agregado again from VC Securities, thanks again for joining us this morning on Starting It, and thank you for your insights on how the markets might move today.
Thank you very much.
We're going to pause for another quick one, but right after this, Tycoon Lucio Tan denies supporting any destabilization efforts against President Duterte. More on that story coming up. You're back on Starting It. I'm Regina Lay. Philippine Airlines Chair Lucio Tan has denied that he's ever supported destabilization efforts against the government. It was no less than President Duterte who had accused him of that. In a statement, the tycoon called the insinuations false and without basis. Tan says, "I have not and will never support any attempt to undermine a duly constituted authority, and I will not sacrifice everything I worked for, including my family's honor, by supporting any attempt to undermine those in power." He added that the Tan family and his group of companies will continue to support the Duterte administration. Duterte has mentioned Tan in public speeches a few times now, more recently when he lashed out at the tycoon for billions, allegedly, of unpaid tax liabilities owed by PAL to the government. Duterte also threatened to shut down NAIA Terminal 2 until PAL settled. The president claimed that Tan was able to get away with the tax liabilities because of the tycoon's threat to fund destabilization efforts against the government. Earlier this month, PAL reached a settlement with the Transportation Department amounting to 6 billion pesos. All right, we're just minutes away from the local markets opening their doors to trade on this very last trading day of the week. And what a week it's been. But time now for our stocks to watch segment. JP, let me bring you back in. What is your pick on this Friday?
You know, since I've been back, Rich, I haven't been able to tear my eyes away from a lot of these second liners, and one of them happens to be my stock pick today. We're looking at SBS Philippines. Now, this is a company that's it's more or less known for dealing with chemicals and raw materials for the chemical industry. They supply mostly chemical inputs for food, feeds, agriculture, and a number of other industries. Now, this stock has been doing relatively well for the year. It's up by about 13% year to date. Not as well as the entire the main index or the oil shares, but it still represents a respectable gain nonetheless. Why am I looking at SBS Philippines? Well, it's interesting because you're seeing a lot of these second liners starting to diversify into other industries, and some industries that they're not really, that they're not accustomed to, or it seems to be quite coming from left field. SBS Philippines says that they just subscribed to new shares representing a 4.25% equity interest in a company called June Holdings Limited. Now, June Holdings Limited is an investment holding company in Hong Kong owned by the Sitenco family. Now, why is June Holdings so interesting and such an interesting story at the moment? Because June Holdings also in Hong Kong recently entered into a pact to acquire 90% of Maxco International Development. Maxco International Development happens to be a property developer in Hong Kong that owns a number of parcels of land in the new territory. So SBS Philippines seems to be interested or keen in getting in dipping into the Hong Kong property market. As we know, the Hong Kong property market happens to be one of the most expensive and one of the most active property markets in the world. In fact, SBS Investment says they are making this in view of positive developments in the property market in Hong Kong. So they have made a clear indication that there is interest on their part in entering into a property development. In fact, Maxco, most of the parcels of their land happen to be in the new territories of Hong Kong, a lot of the islands outside of Kowloon and Hong Kong Island as well. So SBS Philippines making a pretty interesting move so far. The stock hasn't moved as much. It's still stuck at about 6 pesos 25 centavos. But again, it is early. It is early into Friday's session at the moment. We'll see if investors actually take this as a positive sign for the stock. But so far, SBS Philippines making some very interesting moves in an industry that seems quite different from their original base of chemical inputs.
I can understand why you can't tear your eyes away from the second liners, Japes. As for me, I'm still very much focused on the blue chips. Looking at Ayala today, we've got a new analyst rating on it. It's been upgraded to a buy from a hold that is with RCBC Securities. More interestingly, the target price was raised to 1178, which represents an 11% upside above the consensus average of 1059.38. So that tells you everything you need to know about how RCBC sees this stock, the target price being, of course, how they think it will perform over the next 12 months. Definitely, this sits on the high end of forecasts. That takes us to at least 7 buys, although a lot of analysts still on the fence about Ayala at this stage. 6 holds, as you can see at the moment, though, no sells. And it has been one of the most actively traded stocks in the last few sessions. Although what we noticed about Ayala just this week alone, Ayala Corp to be precise, was that there was you remember the run up, the 2 days, Monday, Tuesday in session, run up to the highest of valuations for the PSEI. It was one of the biggest gainers, but then when investors started dumping conglomerates, Ayala Corp was also one of the ones that had to bear the brunt of the sell-off. So again, conglomerates, a little bit of a mixed picture for them this week, highest of highs and lowest of lows, it seems.
And the Ayala Corporation also one of the few stocks that's actually seeing foreign fund inflows continue. They are still being favored in a good light by these offshore portfolios. And again, we'll see if this gives them an extra bump, as if Ayala Corporation needed any more thumbs ups from the markets.
RCBC rating Ayala to a buy now from a hold. Good news for that particular stock. Moving on now, President Duterte himself has confirmed that the terrorist financier of the Mote Group has been killed.
Yung sabi nila si Doc, yung tatlian, Hapilon, tapos yung Doc, he was taken this afternoon. And that completes the story.
The doc he was referring to was Dr. Mahmoud Ahmad, a Malaysian university lecturer said to be responsible for funding and recruiting foreign ISIS members to join the Marawi siege. Experts said Ahmad was set to be the new leader of the Islamic State in Southeast Asia. He was the last high-profile target left in Marawi after government troops killed terrorist leaders Isnilon Hapilon and Omar Mote on Monday. Following their deaths, the president declared the liberation of the war-torn city, but the military says the battle is not over yet in some areas. Because of this, Duterte says he can't lift martial law in Mindanao just yet.
The siege of Marawi was purely ISIS. And that was why I had to declare martial law. Everybody was asking, when will it stop? It will not stop until the last terrorist is taken out.
And on that note, let's toss it back out now to JP for a quick look at the early trades. JP, I keep saying it has been such an eventful week, both on the markets and political calendars. What are we seeing right now?
We're seeing yet another sluggish start to the last trading day of the week, unfortunately, Reg. You're seeing the PSE main index down by over close to 0.3% to 8,463. It seems that the breach of another attempt at 8,500 will probably have to wait if this particular trend continues. You're seeing services the only counter so far in starting out in the green. Even the banks, which had such a strong and convincing move yesterday, are taking a step back, also showing some corrections across most of the banks in the country. They're down by about over 1/3% so far, only doing better than the property counter, which is which is losing the most ground among most sectors at the moment. We want to take a look at a couple of stocks as that are supposed to be moving, but we're seeing some sluggishness, at least for Alliance Global. They're down by about 2 centavos, despite the fact that Alliance Global just bought back 1.1 million shares. Remember, they're trying to complete a 5 billion peso share buyback plan over the next couple of years. And Alliance Global, this is just yet another move or another part of this attempt to do share buybacks. Alliance Global now trading at 15 pesos and 46 centavos. We were talking about looking or taking a closer look at Harbor Star, and we want to at least examine how the stock actually has been moving. Let's just see how Harbor Star is doing. TUG's PM Equity, as we know, is the ticker for a Harbor Star at the moment. And you're seeing that Harbor Star continuing to find some strength right now. They're up by about 6 centavos. PCCI's James Lago did mention that because of their acquisition of that 60% stake in Astro Energy and their move into solar power, the Harbor Star could actually be looking at an earnings boost and perhaps a need to revalue the company also towards the upside. So far, gains starting to fade again as we speak. 2 pesos 60 centavos. A while ago, it was a 6 centavo gain. Now only a 3 centavo gain. But the Harbor Star definitely still something to watch out for. Remember, James Lago said you have to be cautious about approaching Harbor Star because valuations on the stock are still relatively high vis-a-vis the main index and the PSC all shares also. But there is still some upside, and if earnings do start to get a boost because of the acquisition, we could see Harbor Star making another strong move before the year ends.
Now, James, I know you were also keeping tabs of how Surtech might move at the open after that discounted block sale. How is the stock doing this morning?
Well, let's take a look at how Surtech's doing together, Reg. It is something worth noting. And you're seeing that Surtech shares, let me just drop the lower stock down here just to show people. Surtech shares are already down by about 5 centavos. Remember, they did this 12 million share block sale of shares at 39 pesos a share, and that represents a more than 13% discount over yesterday's closing price. Right now, the stock is still it's taken a couple of lumps, but again, not the dramatic pullback we've seen on other companies that have done discounted share sales, such as RRHI in recent times. But it is still weighing on Surtech. Remember, this is a company that has some pretty big plans. They do want to at least move towards listing their U.S. antenna unit Kintel on the markets on the U.S. markets, trying to conduct an IPO stateside for this particular company, and Surtech really trying to broaden their footprint in overseas markets as well. But Surtech today taking a bit of a step back after that discounted share sale that they did, that block sale of 12 million shares, weighing on them, and it could actually prove to be a sluggish day for this particular electronics manufacturer, Reg.
We'll certainly have lots more in the markets when we return. Plus, Nomura dispels concerns over the country's FDI, saying that fluctuations are distorting the big picture. We'll be speaking to senior economist Yuben Paraquelius live from Singapore after the break.
Welcome back to Starting Gate. I'm JP Ong. President Duterte confirmed he fired an undersecretary of the Budget Department over corruption charges.
I tell you, I do not like corruption. I just fired the undersecretary of DBM, Office of the Budget. I was lucky because there were so many people. I wanted to slap him. I even stood up to, wanted to keep him in the face. Fired him for corruption.
While he did not name the official, Philippine Star sources say the president fired Gertrudo De Leon, the DBM Undersecretary for Legal and Liaison. Budget Secretary Benjamin Diokno confirmed to the Star that one of undersecretaries was fired but declined to elaborate. Diokno says he won't replace the removed official because another USEC is returning from study leave soon. Meanwhile, the next DSWD chief could be Senator Loren Legarda. A Philippine Star source within the Social Welfare Department says they're just waiting for a formal announcement, but Legarda's name has been going around the agency. Legarda told the Star that the position was not directly offered to her, and she plans to finish her term, which ends in 2019. Undersecretary Emmanuel Leco currently serves as DSWD officer in charge after the commission appointments rejected Duterte's pick, Judy Taguiwalo. And the Justice Department dismissed former Customs Commissioner Nicanor Faeldon's motion to junk the drug and criminal complaints against him over the 6.4 billion peso shabu shipment. The case was filed by the Philippine Drug Enforcement Agency to the DOJ, but Faeldon argued jurisdiction should be under the Office of the Ombudsman. Faeldon has submitted a counter-affidavit, while the DOJ panel is now proceeding with a preliminary investigation of the charges.
Well, investment inflows into the country is sharply in focus lately amid worries over the impact of President Duterte's rhetoric. For some insights, so we bring in Euben Paracuellas. He's a senior economist at Nomura, live from Singapore. Euben, always good to have a chat with you. Thanks for joining us again. For FDI, I want to kick off with that. That's a bit of a sore point right now. But first, let me recap the numbers, okay? So January to June, which is all the data we have right now, overall net FDI is down 16.5%. Debt is also higher and more worrisome. New equity capital, that component alone has plunged more than 80% year to date. What do you make of these numbers?
I think, Reg, good morning. Highlighting just the year-on-year numbers is a little bit misleading because we know in the last year we've had a lot of inflows related to the banking liberalization, particularly in April. And it could be chunky. So if you strip that out, I think growth is not too bad, right? And if you look at it on an underlying trend basis, it is pretty clear that it's still going higher, even though we have all of these political noise that have persisted. So I still think the fundamental driver of that is really investors focusing on the reform momentum. This is an economy that's growing very fast. In fact, one of the fastest in Asia. It has a large domestic market and a good demographic profile.
So ignore the year-on-year numbers, Euben, is what you're saying, and just focus on the uptrend, which is still headed in the right direction. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah, I think that's a very clear trend. And again, focusing on just the equity capital portion, that's just one component of FDI. In fact, what we've seen in the last 2 or 3 years, it's actually the debt component that's being the big driver. So these are lending of foreign companies to their local affiliates for business expansion and investing more in operations. So these are inflows as well, and it so happens that this is much bigger in the Philippines than equity capital.
Let me broaden the question out a little bit, Yuben. As far as you guys can see, looking ahead, will the president's threats against the EU and sometimes the US turn off investors? I mean, most recently, he's decided to reject all new EU grants, saying that these come with strings attached. What do you think the implications of that are?
Yeah, that's always something that will grab headlines and obviously not very helpful as far as investor perception is concerned, particularly those that are based offshore. But as I said before, it's really not just the political outlook that drives their investment decisions. I think there's a whole lot of other things, business considerations, the reforms, and again, in relation to what the Philippines is doing with the other potential FDI destinations in the region. And again, we just did a big report on that front. And, along with India and Indonesia, Philippines really stacks up as one of the next FDI magnets for Asia as far as, these indicators are concerned.
And as an FDI magnet, where's the interest focused on right now? Are there any particular sectors that are looking more appealing to overseas investors at this stage?
Well, the most obvious one would be infrastructure. And I think there's a lot more scope for that to be expanded, with the Japanese and kind of Chinese investment that are coming through and leading the charge a little bit. But beyond that, the consumer-related sectors obviously are a natural destination for the Philippines, given that it's still a very consumption-driven economy. The middle class is growing, incomes are growing, and inflation is really, very benign. So I think purchasing power is rising, and therefore, for consumer-related sectors, that would be also an attractive destination.
So infrastructure and retail looking very interesting. And in fact, Yuben, there's talk at the moment of opening up more sectors of the economy. We've heard retail, construction, telcos from NIDA, from the Economic Board, and it's the board has actually promised to issue a revised foreign investment negative list by the year end. So you do think this is going to be a game changer?
Oh, that's no doubt a very important step. And as I said before, a lot of the, factors that's hampering FDI inflows are actually regulatory. And to the extent that the authorities are, liberalizing some of that, I think that would be a great help. We've spoken to a lot of these, FDI type of investors in Japan and elsewhere. And obviously they see this as a game changer, as you put it, and gives them a lot more of a mandate to actually go into these sectors and bring in capital.
Yuben, what needs to happen here? Do you know? At the moment, there's a restriction that foreign investors can only own up to 40% in certain restricted industries. What needs to happen? Do we need to take away that entire limit, or easing up just a little bit, like say taking it down to 30%, or rather taking the limit up to 70 or even 80%? Will that change things?
Well, I think, first of all, there's some constitutional limits. So there's some sectors really that foreigners are not able to invest in. But the foreign investment negative list is quite long. I think, in fact, one of the longest in the region. So I think there's a lot of scope without changing the constitution to change the regulation and shorten that list. And, things like infrastructure, construction sectors, utilities, even education services. So there's a lot of these sectors that don't really need that protection anymore and, can compete with foreign players, or in fact could welcome sort of tie-ups with more foreign partners. So I wouldn't necessarily say that these sectors would have to bring down their limits from 100 to 0, but maybe anywhere between 40 to 50 would be acceptable at the initial stages.
Now, lastly, Yuben, before I let you go, I want to talk a little bit about tax reform. When you look at where the tax bill is sitting right now, and the Senate has already missed its deadline to get it passed. There's major discrepancies about the revenue projections between the Senate and House versions, which means ultimately that the horse trading will continue. Does it worry you looking at all of that?
I still think they're not too far behind schedule. I still believe that eventually this will be passed before year end, and they have some time. In fact, I would say that the Senate delay, to the extent that they're actually changing some of their provisions that make it closer to the Congress version, I think that makes the BICAM sessions a little bit less tricky and therefore faster to pass. So again, I'm not so worried that they were not able to pass it before the break. I think it is trying to kind of reconcile already some of their provisions.
Thank you very much for your insights once again. Yuben Paraquelia, senior economist at Nomura, coming to us live from Singapore. We're going to pause for another quick break, but right after this, it's going to be a busy fourth quarter for Philippines AirAsia as it opens up 3 more routes. President and CEO Dexter Comendador tells us about the new destinations. You're back on Starting Gate. I'm Regina Lay. Philippines AirAsia is launching more flights to ASEAN next year. It's also gearing up for its delayed IPO. Bim Santos caught up with company president and CEO Captain Dexter Comendador, I should say, who says the airline is eyeing flights beyond the region once it opens up its hub at Clark International Airport.
We'll be launching our Ho Chi Minh flight in Vietnam this November 17, and then in early January we will be launching Bali and Jakarta. So we are positioning ourselves firmly in the market as the truly ASEAN airline by completing the connections from the Philippines. We're the only Asian airline right now that operates in these 10 ASEAN countries and into the small areas within ASEAN. Of course, this firmly completes the foothold of AirAsia in ASEAN.
Other routes, sir, are you planning to open by, I don't know, by end of this year and perhaps by next year?
By next year, when we've established our hub in Clark, we should be flying the usual route that we left behind before in July 2013. So the natural routes we should be going to are China and Korea, then completing more of the destinations to Hong Kong, Macau, Singapore, Kuala Lumpur, Kotak, Kinabalu. These were the routes that we flew before we temporarily left Clark. So we're going back to Clark. We'll establish it as a base, and then we'll fly internationally from there.
For 2017, how's your performance so far?
So far, it's going to be a better year than 2016, a lot better than 2016. We were able to expand our capacity by 40% and we will be doing it increasing it by another 40% in 2017. We're very optimistic of the market.
You said about you're expecting 13 BBA this year?
Yes, as targeted, we will be meeting what we targeted. We are on track, very much on track.
In terms of fleet, how much did you expand this year and plans for next year?
We increased capacity by 40% this year and another 40% next year. So we should be ending the year at 17 planes from about 13 planes. So next year we should be around 24 planes. And then another 70 planes by the next 15 years.
How's the IPO plans coming along? It was deferred to next year?
Yes. It was deferred by second semester next year. We needed more time to work on the papers and everything.
Are oil prices a concern this year?
Majority of Philippine startups are still confident about their prospects over the next 12 months, but a lack of funding could be holding back innovation. Let me bring in Bing Santos again for the story.
Local tech startups continue to grow, are optimistic, and are looking to tap overseas markets even while facing a host of challenges. That, in a nutshell, were the findings of the 2017 Philippine Startup Survey conducted by Philippne and company PwC Philippines. In a survey that covered 106 respondents from the startup community, an overwhelming number said they were bullish on their prospects for the coming year, while over half have overseas aspirations.
These startups are not looking at the Philippines only. They're looking at regional, and very soon they'll be looking at global.
In terms of challenges, majority tagged access to capital as a primary roadblock. Regulatory requirements were also a sore point. With no less than 66 regulatory and oversight agencies, the Philippines has among the highest incidence of red tape in the region. And while the country continues to lead the region in GDP growth, startups say general business conditions remain a key challenge. For Philippine startups, access to financial resources once again came out tops on the list of things holding back innovation, even though billions of dollars in private equity and seed capital are pouring into Asia. More than 81% identified financial constraints as their foremost challenge, with lack of talent a distant second. The hope is, as more small ventures gain commercial success, more investors will likewise be emboldened to invest in riskier, fledgling enterprises.
The financing issue that they have, I think it will take a lot of time for that to get addressed, because investors are normally, a bit risk averse.
We need more success stories. So the key is to inspire other entrepreneurs to start businesses.
The government, for its part, through the Department of Trade and Industry and the Department of Science and Technology, aim to continue providing venues for startups and foster industry linkages.
We focus on the environment and providing them opportunities in their growth, in their operations, in the way they operate their day-to-day transactions. So it's more on the environment.
Tirado said they're also lobbying to push for legislation that will help startups, such as a startup bill pending in the Senate that offers tax breaks and other incentives, along with the creation of a 1 billion peso venture fund. Bim Santos, Bloomberg TV, Philippines.
A quick overview of the markets on this last trading day of the week sees the PSE continue to at least take a back seat or step back right now. The main index down by about 0.5% to 8,442 points. We're only seeing service and industrial so far in the green at the moment, but everyone else really pointing at another correction or at least a sluggish start to today. But I want to focus on the peso because we haven't really touched on how the local currency is doing at the open. Take a look at how the peso is doing at the moment. You'll see that the peso is actually showing yet more weakness today, 51.56 to the dollar, and you're seeing that the 1 month forwards are also trading at about 51 pesos as 71 centavos. So seems to be a lot of pain and a lot of turbulence in the forex markets again, and we'll continue to monitor how the peso does as Friday continues. But that is your first snapshot of this trading day. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter at Bloomberg TVPH. I'm JP Ong.
And I'm Regina Lay. Thanks for watching and have a great weekend.